The James Show Podcast.
Oh, man, I've got great news to start out for a Monday. Some of y'all must have been praying real hard over the weekend, and it shows, because in the reporting that I was leaving you with when we stepped out of here, you know, we had the new death toll. There was a press conference by your governor in the week last week, and the death toll was up to 135. And the real concerning part is there were still 170 plus missing. That number's come down to 3 in Kirk County. And I think it might just be 3 overall. I was digging through a couple of different reports, but they're all over the place. But the good news is the numbers finally have gone down. We hadn't had that yet. Here it is. Remember, this happened on July 4th. And what is it? The 21st? This is the first time we got a lower number. Thank you, Jesus. About time we got some good news on this one. Because the real concern wasn't just the 135 dead. It was the fact that there may be 135 more bodies that we still got to find. And so that's gone. So that's just like a big, just, you can let a bunch of air out. I know you were tense and you were holding your breath. So the worst is definitely past us on that. And I think the people who are happy to hear about this news is the poor first responders. Because if they're, you saw the big mass of debris that was going through in all these viral videos. You've probably seen the pictures and videos of after everything settled and the flooding had stopped. There was like a car that just the side of it was sticking out of the mud. The rest of it was buried. And you're thinking, oh my goodness, if there's a bunch of human beings under there, we're going to have first responders digging out fellow human beings, possibly children, y'all, for God knows how long, for weeks. Well, if there's only 3 missing, then that obviously PTSD causing situation has been minimized. 3 missing, way better. So how do they knock all these people off the rolls? Some people are complaining that they're like, well, they were really wrong for a long time and had a lot of people worried. Shut up. We're not worried about that now. That's fine. I don't care how they mess it up. I'm just glad. I've never been more happy for a clerical error, if that's the case, if there even was an error. But there was 173 people missing when I left you on Friday. And they do things differently than they did when I started in talk radio, than when you were a kid. Because they use cell phone data now. How many cell phones went dark? How many cell phones were active and they went dark and then they didn't come back on? So I think they're trying to use as many tools and information points as they can. And while we're, in the midst of it, in the immediate aftermath, if some things get a little disorganized and lost in the shuffle, they came back and they plugged in all the lights back in their light bright. And whatever the factor was, maybe it's because some cell phone service returned at the end of last week. Whatever it was, thank goodness that number is finally better. Because it's been breaking my heart to come in and tell you every day it's just gotten a little bit worse. Tell you what else breaks your heart. My Miss Parker has a cousin that lives in Highland Park. Hi, Miss Parker. And yesterday I was over there and my kids were playing with her kids at the park across the street from her house. And there were green ribbons on a lot of the trees. And I was like, oh no, is that for the flooding? Yeah. So there were some green ribbons on some trees. And then when I was coming to her house and then when I was leaving her house, there was another little area where there was a bunch of pink ribbons. And then they kind of melded together where there were a handful of trees that had both green and pink. And I don't know, were the green for the boys and the pink for the girls or whatever it is, that kind of breaks your heart too when you got to see that. Because I don't know if you've ever lost like a child in your family. Like I have 4 children. I haven't lost any of them. But when I was growing up, I had 5 first cousins and we lost 2 of them before I graduated from high school. And the thing that really stings, it's not like something that's going to ruin your entire life. But, you get a lot of attention. At first, when it happens, James, sorry about your cousin. Oh, man, he was a good kid. And, it was like a couple weeks before he was graduating 8th grade. And so they left like an empty chair at 8th grade. But after that, no one circles back and says like 2 years later, hey, I'm sorry about your cousin, or that's so sad, or how you doing, buddy? But it still hurts. Just because it disappears from the news doesn't mean these families that are our neighbors are ever going to stop hurting. And time will kind of deaden the pain a little bit, but it will never go away. And even when the ribbons come down, they're never going to fully be made whole. So it's a heartbreaking situation. At least it stopped getting worse. And the fact that we're only missing 3 people in the official reports. Thank you to all the prayer warriors out there who I guess you got hurt over the weekend. Good job, y'all. At least it's not going to get much worse than it is now. My next guest, Christian Blood, has been a guy on the ground. He lives in Kerrville. He's a fellow talk radio guy on KTSA. Welcome back to the show. Tell us what it looks like from your point of view from a local on the flooding recovery, Christian.
Well, James, first of all, it's great to be back. And as you were just alluding to, finally some good news coming out of this tragedy that's now over 2 weeks old. You were mentioning that the number of people missing in Kerr County just plummeted. As I saw this over the weekend, it wasn't until I read a couple of releases and kind of read up on things that I figured out that while the number of missing has dropped significantly, the death toll didn't skyrocket. And so what we're learning is that several dozen people had left the area as tourists and or visitors. They did get out safely one way or the other, but they failed to notify search and relief operations personnel that's been waiting for phone calls now ever since the morning of July 4th. So it turns out they're okay. And as you mentioned, we're down to 3 people missing. So good news, I suppose.
Well, yeah, fantastic that it's not going to get worse than it already is. We had some successful fundraisers, a nice big fundraising concert last week. Is there anything else that's coming up that you're aware of that maybe the people listening could participate in or donate to?
Well, we do have on our website, actually a lot of websites, we do have a Hill Country Disaster Relief link. I will tell you, though, James.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Is that the Miranda Lambert one?
No, this is one that's comprised mostly of Hill Country and or San Antonio nonprofits and organizations that have just knocked it out of the park as far as bringing in donations. I don't have it in front of me, but I know there's a couple of concerts that are coming. And so the relief effort has been outstanding amidst such a horrible tragedy. I will say, and this is kind of off the topic, we heard from the Insurance Council of Texas this morning, and it turns out there were 3,000 homes in Kerr County's high-risk flood area. Now, how this may pertain to donations, I don't know, but of those 3,000 homes, there were only about 5%, James, who had flood insurance. So around 150 of those homes was covered. If you were affected by the floods and you had no coverage, you're kind of SOL, as they say. So the donations coming in have been fantastic. The adequate water, adequate food. I know HEB's been a major player. There's a long list of, and now, as you mentioned, artists, country music artists. I know Matthew McConaughey is going to appear in one of them. So the outreach has been fantastic. But this is going to take a long time to recover. And that's not just the people who have damage to their homes. People have lost loved ones. There's a long list of things that people still need.
All right, we're talking with Christian Blood from KTSA. He's also a Kerrville resident. And if you're looking on ways to donate, if you go to WBAP.com, we have a page that is in our little headline rotator that has almost a dozen different ways that you could donate. So it depends on what you're into. If you want to help the first responders, if you want to help with the Red Cross or the Salvation Army, if you want to help with the people who are dealing with the pets and the dogs and kitty cats who are also victims of the storm, you can go that angle. We've got you covered. Just go to WBAP.com. Now, you're a resident. Do things even look anywhere close to normal yet?
No, I would say that I did notice over the weekend, gradually we've seen traffic start to kind of die back down. I don't see the choppers. I haven't seen the choppers, the Texas National Guard. We had 4 up in Kerrville, excluding a Coast Guard helicopter for the better part of 2 weeks. FEMA is still in town with several large vehicles parked along Highway 27. So I would say gradually it's starting to get normal in terms of traffic. But James, when you look into the river basin, I don't know how long it will be, if ever, that the broken trees, the branches, you just have to see it in person. It's so compelling how massive the river got so quickly. I think a Kerr County engineer that we talked to over the weekend said that they estimate that at its peak in the Guadalupe River, it was pumping 950,000 gallons per second.
What? That's just unfathomable. When they use big terms,
well, it is.
They say that the storm stretched from basically San Angelo to well past y'all and dropped like 4 trillion gallons of rain. It's like you might as well say 11 trillion. These numbers are too big.
Well, if you to put it in perspective, your average backyard dug-in swimming pool, and I stress average, is about 35,000 gallons. So go all the way to 950,000 gallons per second. And that's why homes were moved, cars were moved, anything was. I mean, I've seen concrete pillars outside of Lewis Hayes Park that was 4 pillars, with an awning over the top. There was a little stage for, outdoor music festival in the summer. They were snapped in half like twigs. So the power of the water, the amount of water, it's not anything that anybody could have predicted. No. And it's just unfortunate, but it's day by day, James. And like we said going in, fortunately, the death toll shouldn't go up too much more, but the recovery is going to take months, maybe even years for many people up here.
All right, one more question for Christian Blood from KTSA. Are your utilities, have they all been restored? I've done a lot of storm coverages throughout my days in talk radio, and sometimes electricity can be out for 2 weeks or even a month for some people, and that's pretty devastating. Well, did your utilities recover yet?
Yeah, as far as I know, all the utilities have been fine. I know that our house was never in danger because of the water, but I remember that night, never going to forget that night, actually. I know that we were without power a good ways from the river just because of the storm, not the rushing water, but the storm itself. I slept through a power outage of close to 7 hours. It really didn't impact us, but I haven't heard anything about electricity and or internet being a problem. But I do notice that FEMA and some of the rescue operations that have come in from the Fed and the state, I see a lot of satellite dishes, so I don't think they're taking any chances up here on that. So,
all right, well, thank you very much, Christian Blood. I appreciate your time again for stopping in on WBAP.
Thank you, sir. Take care.
Thank you very much. This is Brent, Lake Weatherford. You're on WBAP.
Yeah, I'm just driving back from there, and you've seen the pictures on TV and everything. But when you're there and you really see it, you can't even imagine it. It's unbelievable going through Kerrville and the the power of the river. And I talked with a lot of had Weatherford Fire Department was down there, and they were relieving a lot of people, and they said the same thing. What happened is everybody finally got everything together. All the different agencies got together, and then all the people, they finally compiled this list. My question would be, had to be some people down there off the grid, hanging out down there and everything. So that's the only thing I've got. There's always somebody that's, at other places instead of all the RV camps and all that. But all I can tell you, everybody here, I've never seen anything like it. It was so overpowering.
Well, a lot of people are saying that, but Brent, you're probably not going to see anything else like this. This seems to be a once-in-a-lifetime level event, because even when you go back and you trace, has there ever been flooding in this valley before? Yeah, several times, like 17 feet or like 9 feet or one time 20 feet. Yeah. Not 20 or 26 feet in 45 minutes. It's hopefully a once-in-a-lifetime thing. But thanks for sharing your eyewitness account, Brent. Appreciate you calling in.
All righty.
Thank you, sir. The Texas legislature starts its special session today. Or I guess I should say started. I think they gavelled in at noon right before the James show started. And the rules in the Texas Constitution say that they can only pass bills or even consider bills that are on the governor's call for the special session. He has to make like a proclamation. Here's what we're going to talk about. And it looks like the first thing on the agenda, property taxes. Well, that's good, because we didn't really do much about property taxes in the real session. And look, let's get a lot of the perfunctory stuff out of the way, a lot of the formalities. I love the fact that our state legislature is only supposed to meet every 2 years for 5 months. I wish we would stick to that and not have to do special sessions every time. You probably remember in 2023 that we had, 5 different special sessions? So the fact that we keep doing these special sessions and they're expected to happen means they're not really special at all. It's just built in, and we found sort of a workaround to one of the great limiting factors in the Texas Constitution, limiting it to a little 5-month span every 2 years. So first, all right, I don't like the idea of special sessions unless there really is an emergency. This time there really is an emergency. We just had them run out the clock on all our priorities, and they didn't even try to address them. They gave you something called property taxes, but it didn't cut your property taxes. They passed something called school choice, but it didn't give your kids school choice. And so the fraud is just going to continue for a few more special sessions. And if I sound cynical or even skeptical, it's based on 20 years of having to relay this terrible information to you. Now, one of the great heroes of the James Show is a state representative from the Midlothian area named Brian Harrison. He's all over this. Brian Harrison is like a little mini-me, or I guess I'm a mini-him. He's probably bigger than me. Not physically, but he says he's filing 10 bills related to property tax cuts. Oh, yeah. Now, I'm really only interested in one of his bills, to be honest, and that's the one that would abolish ad valorem taxes altogether. And a round of applause for that. Yes. This is a debate that's fun to have because people aren't inherently principled when it comes to so many of these conversations. People say, yeah, capitalism is better than socialism. We got to get rid of all the socialism in our government. Well, okay, so you want to abolish Social Security? Hold up, Parker, hang on, I depend on that. So yeah. My observation of people sticking to their principles has been pretty squishy when it comes to some of these topics. So there's a whole lot of people who will say, yeah, we need to get rid of property taxes. Okay, well, do you want to get rid of all the programs it funds? Well, no, hang on, Parker. Well, why stop? Why not just live on your principles? You and I agree when there's something wrong that for people who have paid off their home 20 years ago, especially if you're like 75 years old now and you're retired and you don't have money coming in, and now you have to keep paying taxes on this home that's been paid off for 20 years after you spent 30 years paying it off. A home you've lived in for 50 years. You can get kicked out of it at any time if you get behind on your taxes. And for I even copied and pasted this one because when Governor Abbott had tweeted this, I think earlier today, a lady named Beth replied to it. I paid off my home 20 years ago. I'm 70 now. I have now paid more than twice in taxes than what I paid for my home. Abolish property taxes, especially for seniors. Now, that's something most people can get down with. There's something wrong with that. You have paid more than twice in taxes what you've paid for your home? That's interesting. So I'll go ahead and give you my gray area. James, you can't just be an extremist and say no taxes at any time whatsoever, period, point blank, in the story. How about this? How about we pay taxes when we buy the property and then never again? It's like a sales tax. Like when I got this Dr. Pepper here in my left hand, it was like $2.85 and then whatever, 18 cents or something like that, 20 cents in taxes. Do they come back next year? And if I haven't drank all this Dr. Pepper, I got to pay 20 cents again? No, they don't do that for other forms of property. They don't do that for your car, unless you count the licensing, which is kind of a good point. But yeah, there's something inherently wrong with that, and I think we can all agree. So now we've got a little bit of gray area to work with. How far can I push you to wanting to get rid of property taxes? And then we have a guy right under that named Pa Bear on Twitter. He said, has Brian Harrison offered a replacement source of funding for all the items property taxes fund? No? Then he's not a serious person. I disagree, sir. Absolutely disagree. Who says we have to replace the funding source? You know what I mean? We want to cut taxes. That doesn't mean we want to cut this tax and we'll raise some other tax somewhere else and take the same amount of money from you. No, the point is you're going to take less money from us, and so you nerds in Austin are going to have to figure out how to live on whatever money comes in. And if you're going to have to cut some programs, then boo-hoo, just cry yourself to sleep on your big fat pillow, okay? No property taxes. Cut all the goofy things that it's funding. I probably don't like them either. James, who's going to pay for public schools? Nobody, I hope. 800-288-9227. 800-288-9227. Did I lose you there, or are you still with me? This stat came out last week, and we talked about it a little bit. And I wanted to bring a crime prevention expert to sort of deep dive into this. And the crime rates in downtown Dallas and downtown Fort Worth look like they're from different planets. And on a good month, like last month, in June, in downtown Dallas, the crime rate was 5 times higher than downtown Fort Worth. Even if you adjust for downtown Dallas being slightly more dense, it's not even that much more dense than Fort Worth. The numbers are still over one. Some months, I believe it was like March, it was 11 times higher in Dallas versus Fort Worth. Why is that? What can we do about it? What lessons can we learn from that? Dr. Alex Carmen's coming back on the James Show, and we need to pick your brain about that. I know you're a local here. What's your theories on, number one, why are these numbers so different, Dr. Alex?
Well, thanks for having me again. Look, I think that the numbers tell a part of the story, but they don't tell the entire story, right? If you look at downtown Dallas versus downtown Fort Worth, you've got a very different ecosystem, businesses, socioeconomic conditions of the people that are transient in those areas is very different. And as we all know, when you have poverty, when you have, high population of drugs, et cetera, it invites crime. And so I would explain it in simple terms that I think it has something to do with the population density and the infrastructure.
So if we handed you the keys of the kingdom, said Dr. Alex Dale Carmen, how do we have Dallas do better, do more like Fort Worth? Where would you start?
Well, there's a whole academic component that we've used for years now called crime prevention through environmental design. We call it CPTED in the field. And what that means is that you basically start redoing the infrastructure, cleaning up the streets, taking the graffiti off, the broken windows theory, whereby, you make sure that there are no disabled vehicles, that you have zero tolerance in the streets as it relates to drug usage. And before you know it, you're going to start seeing how crime begins to travel outwards from the downtown area into perhaps other areas outside of Dallas, which is, I'm sure, what Dallas residents want.
Well, Dr. Alex Carmen, what do you say to people who think that a lot of this lays at the feet of some of the judges and prosecutors who go easy on criminals?
I would say that prosecutors and judges are individuals that obviously, in some cases, right, throughout the United States, we've seen that they have had a great deal of discretion, and in some cases, they've made a wrong judgment, right? And that sometimes, obviously, sadly, for the rest of us, lets criminals out in the streets that are going to reoffend and make the rest of us victims. But
right.
At the same time, in a large-scale crime discrepancy like the one we're seeing in Dallas versus Fort Worth, I would argue that there are multiple factors that are part of that. Perhaps that may be a part of the equation, but I would say that it's remote as it relates to the proximity of the type of crime that we're seeing in the streets of Dallas today.
All right. Well, we're talking about the difference in crime rates between downtown Dallas and downtown Fort Worth. And look, when you pit Dallas against Fort Worth, it looks bad. But if you pit it against other big cities of similar size, like in Atlanta or Chicago, wouldn't you say Dallas is actually outperforming other towns its size?
There's no question, right? But one of the things that you also have to keep in mind is that this particular crime picture only gives you a very close image of some degree of reality, right? We criminologists and those of us that have been practicing this for, in my case, 28 years, we can tell you that most of the crime that takes place in the United States is seldom reported and seldom recorded. And so by virtue of that, what you see in terms of the official crime statistics is only a portion of the real crime that takes place out there. And so by virtue of that, I give some degree of seriousness and perhaps weight to the idea of where the crime rates are. But I would argue that what is probably most important is how fearful are people to go out in the streets in a particular city at 5 o'clock in the afternoon to walk their dogs, right? Or to go do an errand in the evening. That is what the true measure of the impact of crime is on the citizens of that particular population.
Interesting. I always feel like there's sort of an information hole when trying to answer some of these questions, because I would like to see what percentage of crime is committed by people who come from a broken home, or what percentage of criminals were at church the previous Sunday. And I know, these are things that aren't on most forms and are kind of hard to nail down, but I would be really interested to find out some of that information. Could you point me in the right direction?
That information obviously does not exist, right? But what I can tell you as a personal faith is that obviously those of us that follow in my case, Christianity, we know that there's a strong correlation between a practicing Christian, and I would underscore practicing Christian, right, and an individual that doesn't commit street crimes. But I would also argue that there are other types of crimes that oftentimes go unrecorded, like white-collar crimes, gambling, prostitution, et cetera, et cetera. Now, having said all that, although we have strong correlations, it doesn't necessarily mean that there is a solution out there that if somebody comes from a broken home, then clearly they're going to be more likely or less likely to be a criminal. What we do know, however, is that sadly, there's a presence of drugs and is highly correlated with criminal events, and criminal events are correlated with the presence of drugs. So I would say clean up the streets, clean up the ecosystem, remove the habitual offenders from the streets, and you're going to see a very different picture of crime in the streets of not only Dallas, but major cities in the United States.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. This is Dr. Alex Del Carmen, a crime prevention expert. Appreciate your expertise on The James Show, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Well, that's fun stuff. Coming up next on The James Show, I know you missed the WNBA All-Star Game this weekend. I didn't expect you to see it. But did you see that when they came out of the tunnel for warm-ups, the girls were wearing a shirt, "Pay us what you owe us." Okay. You're going to hear the whole cold, hard truth and the economics behind that coming up next on The James Show. 800-288-9227. I'm James Parker on News Talk 820 and 93.3 FM, WBAP.
The James Show Podcast.